So I'm here with Colleen McElroy, the flute instructor for practicing musician. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Excellent. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
So I've been playing the flute since I was in the 4th grade. I started playing music when I was 3. I played the violin. My mom's a violin and piano teacher. And then I started piano when I was 4. But when I got to elementary school band, I decided to play the flute, and it became really clear that that was really my instrument, and that was the one that I really enjoyed to play and practice. I grew up in a really small town in the North Cascades. It's called Darrington. It's a population of about 1,000 people. So I enjoyed a lot of hiking and swimming in the river and being outside while I was growing up.
Did you get inspiration from being outside? And did you take your flute out and go and play in the wilderness?
No, not really. I have played the flute on my porch before at home, but mostly because my brother was also practicing and I needed to be outside.
Okay. So you have a brother. Do you have any other siblings? What's your
Yes,
family?
I have one brother. He's 2 years younger than me. He's a professional pianist, so I guess music is pretty strong in our family. And we have not really played much together. Sometimes he lives abroad currently, so we don't have an opportunity to rehearse, but over the holidays we're playing piano for 4 hands, of course, which he's much better at sight reading holiday piano music than I am, because I usually only have to read one line of music. So that's always exciting.
You started learning by taking lessons from your mom, it sounds like. And so what's the kind of trajectory that you went on after you joined the elementary school band?
So when I started playing the flute, I started taking lessons from my first flute teacher, Iris Ingram, and she's based here in Washington. And I studied with her all the way through high school. And then when I was applying to college, I actually decided I didn't really want to do music professionally. I wasn't going to pursue a college music degree. So I actually went to the University of Washington to study engineering and math. And I did that for a whole year. I didn't really play the flute at all during that first year of school. And I realized sort of around April that I really missed playing music. So I decided to practice a lot over the summer, and I auditioned and got into the program. Sort of in my second year of school, it became really clear to me that I would rather be practicing and playing music than doing anything else, and my other classes weren't as exciting or as valuable to me anymore. And so at that point, I switched my major over to music.
And so you were doing music at that time. Was it performance-based, or what were you studying?
In college?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did my Bachelor of Music degree in flute performance.
Okay. And then you went on to get your master's.
Yep, I took a year off in between my bachelor and my master's, and I worked at the Seattle Symphony in the education department. I took lessons, and I worked in a coffee shop and kind of made ends meet while I was applying to grad school. And then I went off to Boston University, where I studied with Linda Toot for 2 years for a master's of music.
Okay. Yeah, the coffee shop's a great place for musicians to be working with.
It is.
Getting up and going.
And there were other musicians working at my coffee shop, and it was a great job.
Nice. So Boston University, how long were you there?
I was there for 2 years. That's the length of a master's program.
Did you move back here immediately afterwards, or what was...
I did. My family is here. I really love the Northwest. I love living in Seattle, and so that was kind of my goal, is to go do my master's and then come back and try and make a career for myself.
You've mentioned 2 different teachers that you've had.
And I actually have 3. I didn't say Donna Shin, who is my teacher from the University of Washington.
Okay, nice. And she's still there, isn't
She
she?
is.
Yeah.
All of these teachers are still actively teaching.
What other styles have you gotten into over the years?
I played in jazz band for about 6 years while I was in middle school and high school. So
Okay.
while I was doing that, I played saxophone, I played alto saxophone, and I did a little bit of flute in that, but mostly played saxophone throughout my jazz band time.
Did you ever pop out from under a bathroom stall with your flute? No.
No.
Okay. So you also played saxophone. Tell us a little bit about that. Those are intrinsically linked, right?
Yeah, the fingerings for flute and saxophone are really similar. There's just a couple differences in the main body of the fingerings, and of course the extremely high fingerings and low fingerings are very different. Traditionally, saxophone players are the ones who would play flute if there's ever flute called for in a jazz band. And when I decided to play the flute, sort of a few days later, I said, well, Mom, I actually also really want to play in jazz band, and flute isn't a jazz instrument, so I think I'm going to have to play the saxophone. And then I was playing 4 instruments at a time, and that was, she said that was the max. I could not add any more instruments while I was in school. Really playing saxophone came out of just, I wanted to play jazz, and I really enjoyed listening to like John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley and Count Basie, and you can't do that on the flute. You can certainly play jazz flute, and there's some really great jazz flutists out in the world, but if you want to play in like high school jazz band, it's really saxophone is the way to go there.
Yes, that's actually the same thing I did. I started playing flute when I was 4, and then when I got into jazz band in 7th grade, I ended up doing alto saxophone, kind of bridge the gap.
Yep.
Do you still play these other instruments? It sounds like piano you kind of do, but are not as comfortable.
I mean, piano, so when you go to music school, you have to take a piano proficiency exam. So you have to play scales and arpeggios and chord progressions, and you have to prepare a short piece. That was the last time that I seriously practiced the piano, was to pass my proficiency exam. And I do sight read occasionally, and we have a keyboard at my apartment, and so every once in a while I play, or I'll play really easy piano parts with my beginner flute students, which is fun and good for them. I haven't really taken the other instruments out of the case. I'm not as interested in playing saxophone anymore, so that's not something that I have tried to play recently. I have pulled the violin out though, and it's amazing how much your fingers remember even when you haven't played it for, maybe 10 years seriously. So I can pull the violin out, and I remember the pieces that I was working on when I sort of stopped and moved on to my college flute career.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that that's because you started so young?
Maybe. I think it probably also has a lot to do with it. I just practiced it so many times, and I have played the violin for a really long time. So some things you just don't forget.
You've played piano, you've played strings, you've played woodwind. So do you think that that gives you a unique perspective on music in general? Well,
I have met a lot of people that have played a string instrument or played piano before they moved on to their primary wind instrument. So I don't think that's particularly unusual. But I would say that as a flutist, and I think this is true of many wind instruments, we talk a lot about what string players do with their bows in order to get a particular sound out of their instrument. And we try to imitate that with our articulation, or the way that we put weight into a certain note. So I do think that's given me a little bit better understanding of how those sounds are created on the violin, what you can do with the bow, and how I can translate that into my flute playing.
What kind of students do you teach right now? What age groups, and is it a private studio or?
Yeah, so I have a private flute studio. I teach all ages of flutists. I have students as young as 7 and as old as in their 60s. And I really enjoy that because I get to see kind of the full range of people and in different stages of their life and in different stages of learning music, which is really fantastic. I also teach at the DigiPen Institute of Technology, which is a video game technology school. It's very unique, but they have a music program, and so I have a student there at the college level, so I am enjoying that as well.
Like a lot of people, I was told that music is an extracurricular activity, but not really something to do for a career. Why? Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for people that have that mindset?
I think that music can be both things, and I think it's something that's kind of challenging about being a professional musician, is that my job is something that a lot of people do for fun, so it's a little bit weird. But at the same time, I think if you want to have a career in music, you have to want to do that above all other things, because it's not an easy career. If you can imagine yourself doing something else and being very happy doing that, then by all means do it. If you can't, the only thing you can see yourself doing is music, then work really hard at it and make it happen for yourself.
And even if you don't want a career in music, like you're saying, it's still a very good idea to play
Absolutely,
music.
And anyone can play music, and anyone can play music for their entire life, and you can play music as a hobby very well. There's some really excellent amateur musicians out in the world that, you might not tell the difference between them and a professional, and that's great too. Even if you're not getting paid, by all means, play music. Mm-hmm. It's not just for people who do it professionally.
And so even amateur musicians, is there a difference between musicians who even don't just play for themselves and don't even want to play out?
That's fine too. Music is whatever you make of it, and I think if you want it to be a part of your life, then do that.
You're making a living playing music. How do you do that, and do you think that anybody can do that?
There are many professional musicians in a lot of different capacities. So what I do as a professional is I do a lot of teaching. I play with various ensembles as a freelancer. So that means that I'll be contracted for just one performance or a few rehearsals and a performance and sort of paid per service, so per rehearsal or per concert. There's a set rate. And then playing in a professional orchestra is another way that I make my living. Most people, especially people my age, are doing a huge variety of things that kind of come together to make their career in music. So doing a little bit of teaching, a little bit of performing, a little bit of other random music-related things. Yes, it's definitely possible to make a career in music, and everyone's career looks a little bit different. Some people do maybe 90% performing and 10% teaching, or maybe 50-50, both split. I really think the things that you can do in music are kind of at the limit of your imagination. So, for example, what you're doing in music, creating the practicing musician, is like that's one way that you can have a career in music. If you have an ensemble that you have the skills to market and get gigs and get paid, then that could be something that you do in music. And then there's teaching music full time. There's teaching in the schools in music education, and then going on to try and get a professional orchestra job. But I think the key is that anyone who's doing these jobs has worked really, really hard to get them, to maintain them and make sure that they're doing all the things that they want to be doing to be fulfilled in their career.
Actually, we have a couple professors teaching here, and I've got a bunch of professors as my mentors helping me with practicing musician, and they actually even have to subsidize their income. That's just something to be expected if you're looking for a career, is do a kind of grab bag of different.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the more enjoyable things about my job as a musician is that every day I'm doing something a little bit different, and my career is made up of a lot of different factors. So I never really get sick of any one thing.
You're part of Practicing Musician. Why did you decide to become a part of this program, and how do you think it can help people?
Practicing Musician is really cool because it's bringing experts in every instrument into the student's home or into their learning environment. And I really firmly believe that every single musician at any level deserves to have an expert in their field teaching them their instrument. I think any kind of school or organized band program is fantastic, and it's great to be playing music together with people and learning music in a large group. But just the nature of it is that there's too many people, and music really takes sort of one-on-one time to learn and learn it correctly. And so the Practicing Musician is a way that people can get that one-on-one time. Not in person, but it's the next best thing, and I think it's really important to have that expert advising you along your way.
Yeah, and I think, it can be used in conjunction if somebody can afford private lessons,
absolutely.
can be used actually as a tool by the private instructor.
Yeah.